My name is Aaron Barter. I'm with Waterfront Toronto as Director of Innovation and Sustainability. And I'm here with two of my colleagues. So first, Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Caroline Kim. I'm the Urban Design Project Manager for Quayside.
Hi, I'm Minaya Mani. I'm the Project Coordinator for Quayside.
Great. And so Carolyn and I are going to walk through a short presentation, as Julia said. And then we're going to transition into more table discussions. And so we hope that you all come prepared with questions and ready to dive in. At a high level, I want to speak first to the great urban challenge that we are seeking to address in this room, which is sustainability and resilience in the face of climate change. So we know that globally, and including in Toronto, urban growth continues to exceed our expectations, and we're seeing more and more people moving to cities around the world, including many moving here to Toronto. And with that, we're seeing a dramatic increase in greenhouse gas emissions from cities, which is unsurprising. But we know that if we're going to take action on climate, we need to decouple those two things. We need to allow cities to grow in a sustainable way that doesn't also contribute to greater greenhouse gas emissions. And as we're doing that, we know that we're already living in a climate crisis. We know that we're already seeing the effects of climate change on our cities. And so we need to enhance the resiliency of our infrastructure and our buildings and our communities to be able to survive and thrive in the face of climate change. So these are the two overarching goals that we're hoping to achieve. And when we talk about that, we talk about climate positive development. So moving forward, new neighborhood developments that are seeking to get down to net zero and even cross over into net positive GHG at full build out. So we're going to get into what some of those solutions are, but first, a few items for you. We've heard a lot from the public already, and so I wanted to briefly summarize some of those overall themes that have been raised by members of the public like yourselves around sustainability. This is, of course, only a snapshot, and on our website there is full documentation of everything that we've heard. So within support, we've heard lots of discussion around heating and cooling innovations that could reduce natural gas in buildings, such as lake water for cooling, geothermal, potential trade-offs and costs associated with heat pump technology and electricity. We've heard a lot about building automation, and there was support for building automation as a tool for advancing our sustainability and energy affordability goals. Third, we saw an appetite for public investment, understanding that what we're talking about here today aligns very closely with policy priorities at the city, at the federal government, and also at the province. And we've seen a lot of discussion around solid waste management, better ways to enable recycling and getting waste out of landfill. So those are some of the items that we've heard, again, fully documented on our website.
And for considerations, for mass timber construction, there was a question about potential amendments to the Ontario Building Code in order to provide tall timber buildings, with questions about fire safety in the mass timber. For sustainability of mass timber construction, it was questions about the sustainability of mass timber construction. In general, they felt that more clarity was needed on the metrics and where the lumber is sourced. For local food production, agriculture and community gardens should be a part of the plans, and suggested the latter could be located on the rooftops.
And of course, in addition to that more detailed solutions feedback, we wanted to comment briefly on digital. So we know that Waterfront Toronto will require, if the project were to move forward, that all solutions would comply with existing and future legislation and regulatory requirements, as well as our digital principles and our emerging intelligent community guidelines. And what's nice about that is we have precedent within our green building space where we've required through contract compliance with LEED Gold and our minimum green building requirements. Now, in our evaluation results, I want to highlight a few things. This is all captured, of course, in the discussion guide that you have on your table, or that you were given when you arrived. So there were 56 solutions brought forward in the Sidewalk Labs proposal that were seeking to address Waterfront Toronto's sustainability and buildings objectives. And of those 56, we felt that 49 indeed served those objectives and that we would be supportive of them being included in the project. There were, of course, 7 that we didn't see the same merits in and that we would not support. And so within that support category, there's a few different categories I want to explain. The first is solutions where we know that they're very well aligned with policy objectives of governments, and therefore we would work with the proponents to advocate for any required changes to accommodate those, so mass timber being the one that Carolyn will speak about more. Similarly, if there was a need for additional funding and that solution was aligned with policy, we would work with the proponent and governments to make that happen. And then lastly, where we feel like there is a distinct need for additional public sector investment and it very well aligns with our objectives, items like passive house construction, waste reduction, Waterfront Toronto would consider making an investment directly in those solutions. And I also want to highlight that within the solutions that came forward, half of them were digitally enabled, so half were not enabled by digital technology. And we've treated those a little bit differently. So in the list in your materials, you'll see which of the solutions are indeed enabled by digital technology, which of course have potential benefits and then potential controls that would be needed to manage those. So I also want to highlight that this conclusion on our evaluation does not mean that Waterfront Toronto has approved moving ahead with a partnership or the project with Sidewalk Labs. It does mean that we see merit in the solutions that came forward, and we could imagine including those in a plan. But most importantly, and why we're all around the table today, is that we want this round of public consultations to inform those discussions and better understand what you all believe are important ideas that could be included in an innovation plan. And of course, therefore, the level of support that we've indicated could very much change and evolve based on your feedback and what you contribute to the conversation today. So getting into some of the specifics, we begin with passive house inspired buildings. So we know that in Toronto, roughly half of emissions are from buildings, and this is largely due to burning natural gas to heat buildings and also to cool them. And therefore, building high performance envelopes into these buildings is critical for moving a community like Quayside closer to net zero or climate positive. We also know that there are some great co-benefits associated with doing this, like you don't have the same draft when you go near your window on a cold day, and it also should result in lower energy costs, typically. We think what's important here, and this is similar to our approach to LEED certification almost 15 years ago, is that we can prove out the viability of this level of performance, and it can then be adopted more broadly. And we know that this is an opportunity to replicate and to prove out in Toronto's climate this higher level of energy performance. Next up, I want to talk about waste collection. So part of the proposal from Sidewalk Labs was a pneumatic or vacuum waste system. This is an infrastructure system that sits below the streets, below the public spaces, and collects all of these different streams of recycling, organic waste, and waste to landfill separately, and can therefore better manage the collection within a community like Quayside. Again, there are some pretty significant co-benefits of doing this kind of system, such as keeping garbage trucks off the street, which has an aesthetic benefit and also makes them safer for pedestrians and cyclists. And in this case, we know that this is a proven solution that we've seen in cities like Stockholm and Barcelona and many others in Europe, some of which have been in the ground operating without issues for nearly 40 years. So we think that there is merit in bringing this type of system to Toronto's waterfront. So this would be another solution that we would consider making an investment in.
For mass timber construction, Waterfront Toronto would like to support and advocate for government funding for the building's innovation focused around mass timber construction. Sidewalk Labs' innovation for construction is based on a model which combines factory-based production and assembly of building parts and using a sustainable, locally sourced material, and this aligns with our goals for high-performance buildings. Mass timber is a replenishable and sustainable building material that will have significant impact to reducing embodied carbon. And in case you don't know, embodied carbon is when carbon dioxide is emitted during the production of the material. and we believe that this has a positive impact in achieving high-performance buildings. A factory-based assembly using modular building parts can result in cleaner construction. It can reduce construction waste and transportation-related emissions. This approach to building construction has been done in mass timber buildings to date. And for example of a solution we would like to support and advocate for policy and regulatory reform, it's the digital electricity and the mist-based sprinkler system. The buildings at Quayside are also designed to be all electric, using low voltage digital electricity. Using digital electricity means that low voltage power can travel over smaller cables and along baseboards, in comparison to typical conduits that have to be hidden behind walls. The system will reduce the risk of fires and also allow faster construction times. In addition to the digital electricity, the mist-based sprinklers are also part of the innovation, as they use 1/10 of the water consumption in comparison to a typical sprinkler, and allows for faster and easier renovation.
Great. So we now want to speak to one of the 7 examples that was put forward in the Sidewalk Labs MIDP that Waterfront Toronto was not supportive of. And so there was a proposal to capture waste heat from a sewage treatment plant, the Ashbridges Bay Wastewater Treatment Facility, which you can almost see at the window. But it is quite far, and we know that although this type of solution could have benefits in reducing natural gas by using a waste heat to heat buildings, it wasn't appropriate for the Quayside project. This is due to the costs and the logistics and not practical to connect into that facility. So it was not supported by our team and by our evaluation committee. However, other options such as capturing waste heat from nearby sewer pipes or pumping stations still could prove to be possible, but this was not something that we were supportive of. So with that, we've given you only a few samples of outputs of our analysis. We want to hand the room over to the table facilitators, and I'll pass it back to Yulia. The 3 of us, Vinaya, Carolyn, and I, will be on hand throughout this next phase to answer any questions you have about our evaluation.
Thank you, Aaron. Just a few things to set us up. To inform the discussion, or if you need any additional information, you can open your discussion guide. This is attachment 1 that would contain in a summary all the information that was presented earlier today, including what solutions were evaluated and how. Another thing is, again, I'll just remind you guys, if you feel like you need to write something down because you don't have enough time to share everything with everyone, please do so and leave it with us at the end. And number 3, if you have technical question, that's no problem. Keep your hand up, and Vinaya, Caroline, or Aaron will be floating around, so they'll come and answer your questions. Any questions? No? Okay, good. So I'll check back with you in 20. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. Let's wrap up our discussion. We will now share, starting with Victoria's table, what were some of the main topics of conversation and discussion. Everyone at the table, your facilitators will do the report back. Eyeball them. If you feel like something is missing and something is not quite right, no problem. Put your hand up and we'll let you add to it as well. Okay? Victoria.
There was an overall consensus at our table that, yes, we need a project like this to move ahead. Yes, that the innovations are important. And yes, that it's possible. The challenges seem to be that there are human barriers conceptualizing the possibility of this project. So we need to find ways to raise awareness to push through those barriers. We also need a more holistic way of governing the process that allows for the innovations to also improve our broader planning processes so that everything can happen in tandem. So we're not replicating the challenges that we've seen happen in Toronto already with our city building processes. And there was a support for this combination of, it was called old world knowledge, like wood or mass timber construction, and new, so with the digital. So the general idea was, yes, the ideas are great. The paranoia is not necessary, but we need better communication and excellent planning that's holistic. That seem fine?
Great. Thank you. Hilda?
Hi. Okay, there were some concerns expressed to human behavior in the solutions or technological solutions that were being provided, basically in regards to real-time data and how is that, can there be an assessment on how that's impacting behavior, whether people are making positive changes for sustainability or not. Another one was also pricing and the equitable concept of it in regards to vulnerable populations. And specifically to pay-as-you-go concern. And the main question also in government regulation and policies, that if that doesn't go forward, or even with the building code, what impact will this have in regards to the solutions moving forward, or if there's hindrance? And again, a cost-benefit analysis to that.
Great. Thank you. Christine?
Thank you. So for my group, we had a lot of people who live very close in proximity. We have citizens who are very interested. We have developers who are interested in mass timber and city planners. We have 4 main concerns. The first one is use of mass timber within Canada. What happens to Canadian natural resources after this mass timber project is finished? How does that align with long-term and short-term sustainable development goals from the United Nations? Another thing that we're looking at, we're using an American company to develop technology and techniques to use mass timber. Now, can they partner with Canadian timber, not only factories, but planners and builders, so that we can use this technology and technique for our northern communities and other communities that we know how to build these prefabricated houses. Another huge blind spot is resiliency in terms of social resiliency. We look at what happens with natural disasters such as flooding, but what will happen socially? And one recommendation is to look at the World Bank and see how they have addressed social resiliency. And the last concern we have is the metric for emissions. We said that we will reduce 80% of the carbon emissions by 2050, and that's for this project. However, our table believes that falls too short. So let's look at the SDGs, again by the United Nations, and they want to do 0% carbon before 2030. So we definitely need to change our metrics for that. Anything else by the table? Okay,
Great, thank you. Okay, Nate.
So we were generally pretty supportive of all the principles in the document, but we had a lot of concerns about some of the implementation. Specifically, net zero is a great concept, but I think we'd like to see some numbers and some responsibility to make sure that that goal is reached, or if it's not reached, why and what went wrong and how we can improve on it. One of our big concerns was that this project would in the future kind of feel like an island in the city, and we really want to see it integrated into surrounding areas, so it's not just this little foreign country on the waterfront. And that can be through Waterfront Toronto really making a point of learning from this experiment and seeing that those learnings are integrated into future development. Further, I think we talked about this being sort of an experimental project, and that experiment has results that need to be measured and documented and communicated, and just make sure that we see that going forward.
How long the Sidewalk Labs, how long are they responsible for all of this when we make our evaluations? Do they just dump us if nothing works?
Excellent question. Thank you. Okay, Visca.
Hi, so I'll start from the last question, because our group also echoed that same sentiment, which when we were discussing one of our concerns, which was rising water levels, one of the concerns was how long will the developer contribute to the longevity of the infrastructure in the face of climate change? And then to that point, what is Sidewalk Labs' track record in city building and how they are actually acting as leaders, which is commendable. So back to the first question, our group overall agreed that yes, the proposal was sufficiently addressing the challenges we were trying to address for 3 reasons. The first was that we should actually perhaps do more because we only have 10 years left to address climate change. But we should not let perfection in the pursuit of this proposal be the enemy of the larger good of creating a sustainable development. And that there is real opportunity here to look at changing behavioral, social, and economic values of the project, and how the real innovation here in light of these new technologies being implemented is the social change and social value that could arise from it. Some of the solutions that we wanted to see prioritized were flooding solutions, creating a cohesive vision for a circular system, advocacy for progressive policy in the development itself, and metrics for measuring and maximizing the effectiveness of passive house design. Oh, and my group was really into the idea of bringing back the sewage waste heat collection. Yeah.
Very similar to the group we have in the previous rotation. So, okay, great. Thank you. We have about 7 minutes left. I propose we spend them in plenary if you have any questions, and if not, please feel free to go back to the plenary for an aggregate summary of today's session. So, any questions? Do you have a question? Okay, great, thank you. So please feel free to leave, go back to the plenary room where we started today's session if you would like to hear a report back on all of the rooms. Thank you.